This Poetryburst video focuses on Checking Out Me History by John Agard. First, read the poem. The poem is about a man discovering his identity, a person who is beginning to come to terms with what it means to have been raised in a country with a predominantly white history curriculum and to be discovering his own identity as a mix of different cultures. The poem is about the power of a single person. It's political. The poet feels that his identity has been denied, has been taken away from him. The poem explores refinding that identity. The poem is a challenge to a white history curriculum from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s in schools which erased parts of black history, which did not teach them at all. The poet sees this as a violent attack on his identity. The final lines seem to suggest a personal discovery. The poem offers a vivid glimpse of personal anger and pain. The repeated vocabulary of injury and violence is balanced, however, by a positive focus on discovering and reshaping an identity. In our first key quotation we see "dem tell me." Dem tell me what dem want to tell me. Here we see a pronoun, dem, and the verb tell repeated as they are throughout the poem. The pronoun dem is mysterious and faceless. We don't know who they are and we don't know what their role is. It suggests an oppressive power, one that's taking power and keeping it for itself. The verb tell implies the power is not the poet's to keep. The repetition throughout the poem of both this pronoun and the verb tell emphasise both his anger and the sense of oppression that he feels. There's a sense of knowledge being controlled and rationed. What dem want to tell me implies a whole world of knowledge that exists beyond what he's told in the curriculum. In our second key quotation we see blind me to my own identity. Here we get the sense that the poet has had something taken from him. There is a sense of injury and damage. The verb blind and the pronoun me own here form a metaphor for the damage that he feels has been done to him. The verb blind makes this seem a very personal attack. The faceless power are trying to take away knowledge and prevent the poet from discovering it. The idea of sight and seeing clearly is important in this poem. The repetition of the pronoun me is defiant. He's asserting his right and his possession of his identity even as it is taken away. The entire quotation is juxtaposed to the images of discovery that come before and after it. The verse segments in italics that come between each piece of discussion are his identity and his history bursting forth, discovered rather than destroyed. The poem ends with, "But now I'm checking out my own history." The sense of discovery and of building something new. But now I'm checking out my own history makes use of the pronoun I and the possessive pronoun me, as well as the noun history. The connective marks a change and a new beginning. The pronouns I and me in this section of the poem emphasise his personal journey. The noun history places the narrator as part of a tradition, a chain of people stretching back rather than the earlier, more isolated identity. In the final lines, I carving out me identity, we see a man beginning to shape what he wants to be. The pronoun I and the verb carving are added to the possessive pronoun me and the noun identity. The pronouns I and me in this section of the poem emphasise his personal journey. The verb carving is a creative act. It has connotations of wood and creating beautiful sculpture. The verb carving also has more violent connotations when paired with the blind and bandage which were inflicted on the poet earlier in the poem. The tension between creation and defence in this section of the poem asks the audience to consider what it takes to reclaim identity, to challenge oppression. Being peaceful at times, it may imply, is weakness, and to take back something which has been attacked, a violent act may be required.